Just blocks away from the Moakley Courthouse, South Boston residents are still in shock over the brutal murder of 24-year-old Amy Lord, but equally hard to comprehend. An admission by Boston police that a person of interest in the case might have been stopped sooner. 24-year-old Amy Lord was kidnapped from her South Boston apartment last Tuesday morning about 6 o'clock. Seen in this surveillance photo getting out of her vehicle, her attacker apparently forced her to collect cash from 5 different ATMs. After that, she was taken to the Stony Brook Reservation, where police say she was stabbed to death. Friday, Boston police said they had a person of interest in her murder, 28-year-old Edwin Alemany, already in custody for 2 other nearby attacks, both of those within 24 hours of Lord's kidnapping. A serial offender with 52 criminal charges on his record, Alemany's been in and out of prison for years. But it's an attack last September that has the city's residents reeling, and victims' advocates asking, why was Alemany out on the streets? 10 months ago in Mission Hill, he allegedly attacked a 21-year-old woman from behind. She ended up getting his wallet containing his ID, and she turned them over to Boston police when she reported the attack. But Alemany was not arrested. Boston Police Commissioner Ed Davis conceded Friday they may have dropped the ball.
I'm very disappointed in what the detective did in this case. I would hope that a more thorough and aggressive stance on the part of the police department is something that we would pursue in a case like this.
And joining me now, our former Middlesex District Attorney Jerry Leone, now with the law firm Nixon Peabody, and Laurie Myers, founder of Community Voices, an anti-sexual assault advocacy group. Welcome, both of you, and thanks so much for joining us. I'd like to start with you, if I could, Jerry. This is obviously very disturbing. In your job as a district attorney, did you see cases like this come up a lot? Not that ended in murder, but assault like this type of violent assault?
You know, the unfortunate reality is you would see these type of multiple serious violent assaults occurring. This one amounts to be a rampage, fact of the matter is. And you would see this, and it's troubling on a lot of different levels.
Probable cause. I mean, even the commissioner said he believed that there was probable cause in this case. I mean, knowing what you know, and obviously, you know, we don't have all the facts here, do you think probable cause existed for an arrest?
Well, you know, Commissioner Davis is the best. And for him to absolutely initially acknowledge disappointment right off the bat says something. To say that he was troubled that quickly, that means something when it comes from someone like Ed Davis.
You know, and a lot has been made about the fact that this victim, this 21-year-old who was attacked last September, found a couple of months later she didn't particularly want to cooperate anymore in the investigation. And Laurie, you deal with victims all the time. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Right, it's a frightening situation to be in. You know, many victims initially just want to move on and not deal with it. And then, you know, some come back and say, it's haunting me, I want to do something about it, I want this person to be taken off the streets. But it's tough. They're thrown into a system they know nothing about. You know, it's a frightening situation.
Are they discouraged along the way, do you feel? I mean, is there sort of a culture of discouraging the victim from going forward?
Well, I just think not knowing the system. You know, it's again, a system they know nothing about. You know, I mean, who wants to be a victim? You know, so they spend a good amount of time just moving forward, trying not to think about it.
And in this case in particular, I mean, the victim in this case, you know, probably didn't feel that, you know, that it may lead anywhere. So what do you do in a case like that?
Well, the onus is really on the investigators to present the best case that they possibly can. And at some point, as Laurie knows, being such a staunch advocate for victims, at some point it's the government's onus and their burden to bring a case forward on behalf of not only that victim, but on other potential victims. And in this case, we may have seen the worst case scenario.
Because even if this victim decided not to follow through and didn't want to identify someone in a lineup, didn't want to testify, I mean, police are still, or prosecutors are still required to carry out that case.
Oh, sure. You bring a case on behalf of the community, not just individualized victims. And one of the most difficult conversations you have in this business as a prosecutor or an investigator is to tell a victim that you're going to pursue a matter on behalf of the greater good.
In a case like this, Laurie, how do we teach people to speak up?
I just think, you know, many victims that we work with, they don't want another person to be victimized, and I think that's what motivates many victims to speak. You know, it's such an unselfish thing for many victims to put themselves out there, to go through the criminal justice process, to have to testify, and most of them are doing it because they don't want it to happen to another person. So, you know, I mean, education, it's, you know, it's tough because the criminal justice system, unless you work in the system, you know, many people are not involved in it. And, you know, there's that whole, it's the whole unknown of the criminal justice system. So.
Well, one of the things that the commissioner said was that in this particular case, the system may have failed. I mean, do you feel that the system fails oftentimes in prosecuting these cases?
The system can fail people. It's a very human element that attaches to the criminal justice system. It's a very difficult system, as Laurie has alluded to, and oftentimes the system will fail people. But I like to think that the human element of investigators, prosecutors, advocates on behalf of victims don't fail persons as much as sometimes the system does.
So what could the Boston police have done differently in this case?
Well, based upon what we now know publicly, it seems like there may have been evidence that amounted to be probable cause, which is all a police officer needs to make an arrest. That would have resulted in that defendant being brought into court, being arraigned, and being subject to the processes of the criminal justice system. And that's not just arraignment and the following criminal process. It could be an evaluation, and it could be treatment from everything from mental health to addiction issues.
Absolutely, that's true. And I know in this particular case, even though this victim had apparently an ID, she may not have seen the perpetrator's face, the attacker's face, and then what do? I mean, do you actually have to see the attacker to be able to bring a positive case of identity?
No, cases are brought on circumstantial evidence all of the time. Based upon what we know publicly in this case, if someone is choked to unconsciousness and wakes up with the wallet, what identifies someone who they've never met before, well, that's good evidence to, at the very least, make that person a target and focus the investigation on them and make them subject to some type of an interview.
Laurie, do you have any kind of advice for investigators?
Follow through with it. You know, you don't, obviously they dropped the ball in this case. It's unfortunate, but you want them to take the next step. You know, just because the victim says, I'm afraid, I don't want anything to do with it, they really need to investigate it, because then it becomes a public safety issue.
Right. And even when you would say even in a case where the victim is not cooperative.
Right. I mean, you know, they had the wallet, and Jerry can speak to that more than I can, the law enforcement side of it. But you want somebody to follow up on that, and who knows? It could have resulted in more supervision for this individual. Who knows if he was on probation? You know, we don't know the circumstances. It's a bunch of what-ifs at this point. But
we also, and we have to point out, again, I mean, this person has not been charged with this murder.
That's right.
Police are calling him a person of interest. He has not been charged with this murder. But again, police calling him their person of interest. Thank you so much to both of you for joining us today on Greater Boston. We really appreciate it.